All right, let's just jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the sinking of the Al-Sad, which is a story that honestly just shatters the illusion that we can out-engineer nature. We're going to dive straight into how this seemingly invincible engineering marvel was completely swallowed by the ocean. It's a fascinating look at the fragile line between massive human hubris and nature's cold reality, and we'll be exploring both the incredibly intimate human cost and the big picture lessons left in its wake. Now, think about this claim for a second. The ship they claimed could never sink. Oof. The irony there is just immediate and painful, isn't it? You hear a statement like that and you just know it's the ultimate setup for disaster. They built this thing with what they thought was a revolutionary system of watertight compartments. But actually, scratch that. The system proved completely useless once the hull was compromised across multiple sections. It's that classic, tragic arrogance. The grander the claim of invincibility, the harder the eventual fall. That supreme arrogance shadowed the Al-Shade from the very day it was conceived. And keeping that absolute certainty in the back of your mind really frames the terrifying reality of what went down out on that freezing water. Because the reality of this didn't just play out in engineering failures, it played out in these agonizingly intimate micro-moments. Picture the scene. Panic is absolutely peaking. The noise is deafening, the cold is literally biting, and we zoom in on Zoya. She's just been put into the very last lifeboat. And I mean, this boat is at capacity. There's absolutely zero room left, and you can just feel the desperation in the air. Zoya is sobbing, but she's reaching out, tightly holding Kamran's hand from inside the crowded boat while he's still stuck standing on the deck of the sinking ship. And right in the middle of this overwhelming, chaotic terror, Kamran does something incredibly powerful. He just smiles gently, he leans in, and he whispers his final goodbye. It's this profound, heartbreaking human connection right on the absolute edge of disaster. And as that whisper fades, the massive physical reality of what's happening just entirely takes over. The ship's colossal stern is lifted high into the cold night air. It's this unbelievable, terrifying silhouette of twisting metal just groaning under unimaginable stress. And then, the lights abruptly cut out. Pitch black. That singular vent, this colossal, brilliantly lit giant suddenly plunging into total darkness, is the ultimate undeniable failure of this grand human creation. The so-called unsinkable ship is actively being dragged down into the freezing abyss, and it's taking all those arrogant promises of safety right down with it. Now, what is absolutely wild about this is the timeline. The sheer speed of the tragedy is staggering. We go from the ultimate claim of unsinkability to total destruction in a mere 2 hours. Just 2 hours. At minute 0, the ship is an active marvel steaming ahead. Fast forward to minute 60, and the brutal reality has set in. Panic has erupted, and that final, overcapacity lifeboat we just talked about is already boarded. At minute 90, we get that horrifying visual of the stern lifting and the power totally failing. And by minute 120, the Al-Said is completely buried in the depths. In 120 minutes, an invincible giant is wiped off the face of the earth. It completely destroys any illusion we might have about our technological dominance. And then comes this massive, jarring, atmospheric shift. You transition from the frantic, violent destruction of the night to the eerie morning aftermath. The sun slowly comes up over the horizon, and it illuminates an ocean that is perfectly, entirely calm. It's as if nothing had happened at all. You just have a few surviving lifeboats drifting aimlessly in the quiet water. The contrast is honestly kind of devastating. The ocean doesn't mourn, you know? The frantic energy of the night, the screaming metal, the flashing lights, all of it is instantly erased by the slow, quiet indifference of the morning sun. So the physical storm has passed, right? But it leaves behind this endless, haunting grief. Just imagine Zoya again, sitting in that drifting lifeboat under the bright morning sun, staring blankly out at an endless, empty sea. She's anchoring all of her overwhelming grief to a tiny physical object, a keepsake Kamran gave her, maybe a ring or a watch, just clutched super tightly in her freezing hand. Because it wasn't just thousands of tons of forged steel and coal that sank to the bottom that night. Along with that vessel, hundreds of dreams, futures, and entirely untold human stories went to sleep forever. And we really need to pause here for a second for a solemn tribute, in memory of those who lost their lives at sea. It's a stark but entirely necessary reminder to honor the lives, the families, and the futures that were forever lost to the depths. Taking a beat to simply acknowledge the profound human weight of the tragedy ensures we aren't just treating this as some distant historical trivia or a simple engineering failure, but as a deeply painful human reality. Which brings us to the core philosophical lesson of this whole story. the beautiful but totally unforgiving ocean. Because as breathtaking as that water is in the calm morning light, it is equally 100% merciless. It has absolute zero mercy for our ambitions. It does not care about the unsinkable labels we arrogantly slap onto our creations, and it definitely does not care about the whispered goodbyes between two people torn apart. Its breathtaking beauty and its absolute brutality are literally the exact same thing. Ultimately, we are left staring at this stark contrast: man's grandest creations versus the absolute power of nature. The Al-Sayed represented the absolute peak of what we thought we could control. It was built on this massive, defiant scale. But on the other side, you have the vast, totally indifferent ocean. And the lesson here is incredibly humbling. It tells us that no matter how magnificent human engineering gets, no matter how much steel we forge, how deep we calculate, or how high we build, up against the absolute power of nature, we are always going to remain incredibly small. Nature always inevitably gets the final word. We've seen the hubris, we've walked through that staggering 2-hour timeline of destruction, and we've felt the endless haunting grief left in its wake. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to chew on. Will humanity's grandest creations ever truly rival the unforgiving, absolute power of nature? Or are we just destined to keep building these unsinkable ships, only to be repeatedly reminded of our fragile, temporary place in the natural world? Really makes you think, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those hard questions, and I'll